Okay, so the nerdy statistics guy was actually talking about building a bridge between the statistics that he had on quality so that he could use those to present a credible and defensible conversation when he talked about whether or not something was ready to build. Peggy was talking about, let's see, I made some notes. Disorienting when the projector doesn't work. I like what Peggy said about don't be afraid to ask why. There's a talk tomorrow. I met the nice lady who's doing it at the reception tonight about feeling like an imposter. Her name's Berglund. She's from Iceland. She's kind of interesting. And the notion of being an imposter is, I think, one of the things that discourages a lot of project managers and quality managers from delivering news promptly. And that's what the title of this talk is about: hard conversations. And we need to have some hard conversations sometimes about software quality with executives. I'm not talking about with the team. I'm talking about at an executive level. My thing is executive sponsorship. Okay? Brian Walker drew a picture in his talk where he talked about typical Scrum, where we've got the Scrum leader, the team, and the user group. And now, you know what? I guess you can try to set that up. I'll wing it for 5 minutes, but if you don't get it set up, we're good. And he added the architect in there, which made me happy, because when I used to have a real job, I was a systems architect, and I haven't heard people talk much about architecture in Agile. And I like the fact that he took the beautiful Scrum picture that you're all familiar with and bolted the architect role onto that. I want to do the same thing. I want to bolt something onto your picture of a standard Agile development team. It's the project sponsor. And my background is heavy lifting computer science. Then I did a lane change after I left IBM about 25 years ago. And I've been working as a project manager, coaching project managers and teaching project managers for the last 25 years. And in the last about 10 years, we've realized something kind of slowly in project management. And that's the vital role of the executive sponsor. And when people talk to me about Agile, they say, well, no, you know, we need the user representative. It's like, I don't think the user representative is the project sponsor. Oh, she's here, the nice Iceland lady, hi. I don't think that the user representative, the product owner, is the same thing as the project sponsor. When I talk about a project sponsor, I'm talking about someone on the nosebleed section of the org chart who understands the strategic plan, understands where your product fits into it, and understands how that ends up shifting to deal with the winds of change in an organization. Let me give you an example. Some of you are probably working on have been working on a project for the last 6 or 8 weeks. Your project was going on 6 or 8 weeks ago. There was an event that happened about 4 weeks ago that had nothing directly to do with your project unless you work for Experian. But it absolutely influenced your project if you have any external facing or you're holding any customer data. Experian being on the front page of the Wall Street Journal did not affect your product owner, did not affect any of the folks on the team directly, but somewhere in the nosebleed section of the org chart, someone cared a hell of a lot more about security the day after the Experian hack was released. Equifax, thank you. Thank you. It's an E word. My notes are in there. But thank you. You know, it was the Equifax hack, right? And you didn't have anything to do with that, but it changed your requirements. Why did it change your requirements? Nothing to do at a tactical level. It was strategic change. So what I want to do is talk about where projects come from. We got a little. This is I snuck in earlier and made some pictures. And where do the ideas for the projects that you work on come from? What are the ideas? This is the audience participation portion of our show.
Executive coming back from a conference.
Product manager. Where else? Think of projects you're working on right now. Where'd the ideas for those come from? Say again? Sales. You. Now we need them. We go out of business without them. Where else? Novel place to go looking for ideas.
Press.
Press. Where else? Developers. Oh, the humans. Yes, the humans sometimes have ideas.
There you go.
Thank you very much. Competitors. Thank you. Problems. Let's add new technology and declare victory.
Regulation.
Okay. New tech and regs, changed regs. I'm sort of artistically challenged, but this is not a toilet. These ideas, and actually you can have multiple ideas for these different sources, are all going into this big, we'll call it a hopper. Lots of ideas coming in the top, only a few ideas come out the bottom. We now have a physics problem. We got more flowing into the top of the funnel than coming out the bottom. Where do the other ideas go? Got to talk loud. Backlog. The backlog, yeah! We have an arbitrarily large buffer. And what's that sound like? Simon, that's a great idea, but probably not this year, probably not next year, probably never, but we don't have the stones or to be politically incorrect to say no. So we'll tell you backlog. Where else do the product ideas go? Now, these are the ones that get approved and are happening. Where do the others go?
We approve next quarter.
Yeah, okay, well, we'll loop them around. Where do the others go? Oh, skunkworks. Shame on you.
It happens. That is a term.
Some go as a conscious choice. Some just go in the backlog long enough that they spill over. Something very special has to happen inside this funnel for a project to get out the bottom. And that is someone in the organization with some juice has to say, this is the best use of our resources at this time. I call that person the project sponsor. Project sponsors usually are not involved on a day-to-day basis unless something has caught fire. But they're the people you go to if you need to make a substantive change to schedule, substantive change to functionality. If you're having a wrestling match with your product owner, he says, this absolutely has to be there, and it's not going to happen unless we spend more money or take more time. We have that immovable object and the irresistible force. The project sponsor is the person that is going to break that jam for us. And so in theory, they've got this thing going. So let's first turn off video mirroring so you can't see the jokes. And talk about hard conversations with the project sponsor. I guess I have to say go. Hard conversations with the project sponsor. The reason they're hard conversations is when we have them. We don't usually get to have them early on. Act surprised. That's my key message. We want to have these early on. Usually, we're having them kind of late. We're having them under stress. It's fourth down, long yardage, seconds to play in the game, and we're way behind. And now we're having a conversation about trade-offs. We're having a conversation about quality. We're having a conversation about what can be delayed. What I want to do is talk about moving those earlier. Move those earlier in the conversation. A client once told me when I was a young rookie consultant, the burden of communication lies with the party that has the most to lose. And I really think that's true. I think if the project sponsor can look at you in the 11th hour when things are not going well and sincerely say to you, you should have told me sooner. You have a lot to lose as a project manager and as a quality manager. No surprises. That's what executives want. You know what? Yeah, executives want on time, happy customer. They want it all. But if you're going to disappoint them, what they want is no surprises. So, here's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about quality. I'm going to give you a definition of quality that works for my purposes. I appreciated the fact that Penny this morning says, yeah, quality, kind of a squishy word. I was talking with her after. I said, I'm going to define it. She says, you know, it's hard to stand up in front of a bunch of quality guys and say, I don't have a good definition of quality. I said, it's scary to stand up and say, I'm going to define it. I'm going to define quality for you. I'm going to talk with you about sponsorship. I'm going to give you 3 tips, and we'll declare victory. Okay? How many of you ever seen this book, Quality is Free, by Philip Crosby? A couple of you have. How many of you read it? 2 of you have. Book came out around 1982, I think, and it was mandatory purchase for everybody in the software industry. It was a mandatory purchase. And you could see it in the 80s and 90s. You could see it on every manager's shelf. Several of them actually read it. And what they'd say, you'd be having a conversation and say, quality is free. I want lots and lots of free quality. And what the book said is quality is really expensive, but it's a good investment, and it will more than pay for itself. But most people never got that far in the conversation. Okay? So, what I want to do very quickly is define what is quality. And I'm going to look to some of the luminaries of quality, and I'm going to be arrogant enough to try to synthesize them in a way that might be helpful for you, I know is helpful for me. Ishikawa and Deming said that quality and customer satisfaction are the same thing. People love that. People love that. Oh, quality. Quality is goodness and heaviness, and if customers like it, that's quality. Duran said, quality is meeting or exceeding customers' expectations. I hate that. You know what happens if you exceed customers' expectations? They rise asymptotically, and suddenly they are never attainable. Right? You wanted 100%, I gave you 110. Next time you want 110, I need to give you 120. And at some point, it becomes a vertical line that can no longer be delivered. Crosby had a very interesting take. He said quality is conformance with requirements. I liked that. As a software developer, it's like, okay, so if I've got requirements and I give you that, to the extent I can give you what you asked for, I think that's quality. You could read some of this in the meeting, cut out the exceeding. You could read that up here. How many of you are familiar with Jerry Weinberg's work? If you're a software quality nerd, you should read everything he ever wrote. You should start with Quality Software Management, volumes 1 through 4. Jerry brought the notions of quality out of manufacturing, which is a repeatable process, and said, hey, you know what, we can apply this to software projects. And there's a piece of software projects that are different than manufacturing. All right, if you've read a bunch of the quality literature, a lot of it's about, I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again. And just like Phil said in the prior session, the reason they were able to build the Golden Gate Bridge in 4 years is they didn't invent anything. They applied existing engineering processes. And so Jerry kind of brought quality into a project realm by saying, you know what, quality is value to somebody. I thought that was interesting. So I like those two. You get to pick and choose. The nice thing about having multiple definitions. So I'm going to refine and simplify. Crosby says in his book, if a Cadillac conforms to all requirements of a Cadillac, it's a quality car. If a Pinto conforms to all the requirements of a Pinto, then it's a quality car. And those of you who don't have gray hair like me may not remember some of the problems Ford had with the Pinto. Ford Pinto came out in 1972. It was supposed to be an answer to cheap imports. The target was to weigh less than 2,000 pounds and cost, you won't believe this, less than $2,000. And they solved that problem. The Pinto, when it first came out, was $1,999.99. And the way that they did that was they minimized how much steel there was. There was no steel from here back. And there was a little bit of a problem. In a rear-end collision, there was no steel to protect the gas tank. And so if you got hit from behind, it not only punctured the gas tank, it locked the doors. Little bit of a problem. As Weinberg reminds us, yeah, you can say quality is conformance with requirements. That assumes you have the right requirements. And you should be afraid. If quality is conformance requirements where conformance represents value to some person, okay, I like that. Now I'm going to interject my notion of project sponsors. Somewhere on the nosebleed section of the org chart, there's someone who gets to decide which of our stakeholders are we going to make happy, and how happy are we going to make them. This is a very important idea, and I don't think that this is the same thing that you're talking about when you talk about a product owner. Product owner may be a very important stakeholder and may represent a whole bunch of interests. They may get through a lot of the sponsor filter. There are going to be other stakeholders, maybe regulators. And the sponsor says, yes, I care about these regulators. There are going to be other people that don't make it through the filter. It's not that they aren't important stakeholders. The sponsor says, yeah, you know who often gets the shaft? The guys that have to maintain the system after we build it, right? I need you to, who is this? Tammy, we need you to build the system really fast. And she says, that involves trade-offs. For example, maintainability. And the sponsor looks at you and says, I'm willing to sacrifice that on the altar of getting this done quickly and cheaply. And what the sponsor just said was, yeah, I like those guys, but I don't like them enough to delay this and wait and pay for this. And as much as that can gnarl our guts up as engineers, that is a business decision, and those guys get paid to do it. So let's refresh where we are. Weinberg let us talk about requirements, and I like that a lot. And we said quality was conformance to requirements, but since perfect requirements don't exist, requirements are a known source of quality issues. And requirements are dynamic and constantly evolving, right? Who here works on web apps? Terrible news. Somewhere, someone just came up with yet another browser. Right? Constantly evolving. And the sponsors can capriciously change whose requirements they care about. So basically you're doomed. Thank you very much for your time. Oh wait, this was supposed to be constructive. The conversations, that's right, conversations, thank you. Okay, so let's remind ourselves, again, I'm the project management nerd. When we talk about a project, we're talking about three things. What do you want, when do you want it, and what resources you will commit to get it. There's some people that are really clever and they say there's actually 4 dimensions and quality is a 4th dimension. They're wrong. You cannot have an intelligent discussion about project scope and functionality without talking about quality. They're inextricable. They're inextricable. Project management is a set of skills that help us do this. So then the question is, if this is going to be such a fraught task, if we're doing this based on requirements, because we're software nerds and we're doing this based on requirements, and requirements are fluid, why would we ever undertake a project? Because sponsors assume if they're going to let something come out the bottom of this funnel, that it's feasible, it's a good investment of resources, it's doable in some reasonable amount of time, and it's worth the risk. Those are assumptions. And they might be wrong. I'm kind of passionate about assumptions. If I had a superpower, I'd wave my magic wand and you would all be more aware of the assumptions you're making and that others are making. Because I can tell you as a magician, assumptions are a big part of what I use. I like to do a demonstration with my magical assumptions card. It's got 1 spot on this side, watch carefully. 4 spots on this side, here we go again. 3 spots on this side and 6 spots on this side. Now, help me out, what are we doing here? Let's count them again. 1, 4, 3, 6. How many spots on the magical assumptions card? This is the audience participation portion of the show. You don't know, but you can see 4 when I hold it this way, and you can see 5 when I hold it this way, and once you've got it figured out, you're okay, but see, the assumptions are what get you, right? So how many spots on this side? 2. So it's 2 on this side and 5 on this side. 2 and 5. Now that you got it figured out, that's how assumptions work. As a magician, if I can get you to make assumptions, I got you. Get you to make an assumption and reinforce it. Here's the problem. Sponsors make assumptions about a project. Humans are lazy. And if we make an assumption and it's not disproved, it rapidly moves into the column of things that are true about the universe. And sponsors forget that it's an assumption. Guess what we got to do? We got to remind them. There's your first tip. We want to continually remind sponsors of the working assumption that this project is feasible and worth the investment and the risk. I want to remind them that on a constant basis because I want them to know it's an assumption. Okay? And the question we want the sponsor to always be asking is, with what we know now, does it still make sense to continue? So I have a tool for doing that called the cheeseburger talk. Cheeseburger talk is the most important conversation in the life of a project for my nickel. This is where Jessica is my sponsor. A project comes out the bottom, and I believe you guys have probably all adopted the international standard for project manager selection, right? You guys do the same ritual with the prancing horses, the trumpets, the white robes, and the sword, right? You guys know the ritual? Or do you do the cheap version? The cheap version just has the magic words. You know the magic words, right? Hey, Lonnie, got a minute? And when she hears that, she knows a project got out the funnel. The first order of business is you want to have a conversation with the sponsor. Here's what you want to talk about. Project history. How did we come to be here? Why are we doing this? What's the value we're going to get? What's the value our organization is going to get out of this project? What do you want? What is the scope of this? We're not going to get into blood and gore detail requirements, but I want to know, what is it we're trying to accomplish? Are we trying to deliver a cheaper word processor, a better word processor, a word processor for a target niche? Help me understand, what are we trying to accomplish? When do you want it? It's not when you're going to get it. It's when do you want it? We'll figure out in planning how long it's going to take to get it for you, right? What are you willing to invest to get it? It defines the three sides of that triangle, and what we're about is trying to understand what is it exactly that the sponsor wants. Here's your killer question. I want to review that with the sponsor right here. Review this with the sponsor right here. So what we're saying right now is, if I could get you this at that schedule with these resources, you'd be happy. And right now, we are assuming this is the best use of these resources at this time. And then you ask a really, really good question. If at any time we develop concerns about our ability to pull this off, when do you want to know? That's one of the best questions in my kit bag, ladies and gentlemen. I've been asking that question for a living for about 30 years. What do you suppose the answer always is? As soon as possible. That makes it a rhetorical question. Why bother asking a rhetorical question? It reinforces my relationship with the sponsors. My job is to get to them promptly. Tip 2. Yes, please.
Explain the cheeseburger and toast.
I'll give you the short version. Happy to chat with you after the talk. We're done at 5:30?
Yeah.
Okay. The short version. If I'm going to have this conversation with you, Jessica, the sponsor, I don't want to do it in your office. I want to do it over coffee or over cheeseburger, over breakfast out of the office, so I can have your undivided attention. If I do it in your office, we got the corner office, we got the administrative person to make sure I don't get more than the 30 minutes that's assigned. There's going to be someone running in with papers to sign. The phone's going to be ringing. The day has happened to the sponsor. I want to have a one-on-one conversation. I know how the org chart works. I know who I work for, but I want to have a no bullshit roll up the sleeves conversation about the project. Some of the project history pieces that we talked about might be politically incorrect or a little sensitive. Someone will share with me over a cup of coffee that they wouldn't maybe share otherwise. Thanks for asking for that clarifying question. If you Google it, you can get an article about the whole thing. Second tip, trade-offs may be necessary. Duh! But see, that's another way to reinforce these conversations with the sponsor, right? George, what you want is completely reasonable. Right now, as we get into this part of this is an exploration process, and at some point trade-offs may be necessary, and it'd be really helpful if first you need to understand, I'm not going to make trade-offs. I'll make recommendations. You get to choose, and it'd be really helpful to understand what trade-offs you'd like me to make. So let's imagine your child has moved out and they're worried about transportation. Well, you could get them an Uber pass that was worth $500 and tell them to manage it well for the next semester. You could spend $2,500 and get them a cheap car. You could get them a Tesla, or you could get them a Lamborghini. And if you don't get your kid a Lamborghini, you're a terrible parent. No, actually, if you don't get your kid a Lamborghini, you're making trade-off decisions. What do they need? What can you afford? How much into hock are you willing to go? I'm assuming there's no multi-billionaires at the conference. So I have a tool for talking with sponsors about priorities. If these looks like Post-its, that's because that's how I do this. Here's the approach. This matrix works like this. There's 3 rules. You get 1 X per row, 1 for resources, 1 for schedule, 1 for scope. That's why we call it an RSS matrix. You get 1x per column. One of those is going to be the least flexible of the three. One's going to be the most flexible of three. One's going to be somewhere in the middle. And the sponsor gets to choose where they go. So we have the conversation that says, Simon, if this was going to take $1,000 more or 2 weeks longer, which would you prefer? And then he gets to choose. Maybe he says, okay, you know what? I would hate it if I had to come up with an extra grand, but I would rather come up with an extra grand than 2 weeks. At this point, you're not committing to anything. You're giving an idea of your priorities. You say, well, okay, that leaves these two, so we'll look at these two. If push came to shove, if it took an extra 2 weeks or I had to cut the lowest priority function, what would you rather I did? And maybe we're bursting at the seam. We can't cut functionality anymore. Or maybe we say, well, yeah, we could do something else in phase 2. That tells me your priority is to try to hit the schedule target. It's not a promise I can do it, but this helps me understand the trade-offs. We can repeat that process for the last two, and this says you would be more amenable to small requests for resources. As they get large, all bets are off, before I throw functionality overboard, and you'd be more amenable to slight reductions in functionality before I hit schedule. And if we had this conversation with a sponsor, we've accomplished 3 things. First, we reminded them trade-offs might be necessary in a very unobtrusive way. Second, we have a snapshot of their priorities today. They might change tomorrow. And third, we have a problem-solving tool that's really helpful for me and the team. And I know we're pressed for time, but I still want you to take just a moment. I want you to think of a real-world project you're working on, and just in the margins of on a piece of paper or mentally commit and figure out what would you guess the priorities are for that. I'm only going to give you just about 15 seconds for this. Make it a quick, snappy guess. Resources, schedule, and scope. By the way, this is a game you can play with your team. It's fun. All right, you got a hack? All right, I want you to imagine I brought everyone associated with that project. QA, development, product owner, project sponsor, project manager. Got all the liars in one room. We shared this tool, then we sent them all off to a neutral corner with a blank piece of paper. We had them all draw their priorities. Then we get them all back and we share notes. Do you think they'd all match? You got a huge communication problem on that project, where Tammy is going schedule, 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 bend it to fit, paint it to match, throw money at the problem, but my God, hit the schedule. And you're not wearing your badge. Who are you? Who are you?
Neka.
Neka says, budget, 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 might take longer, might have, and you're going, scope, 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 might cost more, might take longer. You guys are on the same team, you love each other, you trust each other, and you're working at complete cross purposes. This is helpful. It's a gross oversimplification, but it's helpful. We're going to capture that in a project charter. Third tip. Imagine we're setting out on a voyage on a big 3-masted sailing ship. It would be foolish to prescribe how much sail we are going to be giving how much sail we're going to give that ship over the next 2 months as we sail to the New World. Hey, it's Columbus Day. We'll sail to the New World. Because we have to react to the facts on the ground. There's an old Scandinavian proverb. When the terrain and your map don't agree, believe the terrain. And so I spend my life teaching people how to do plans. There's nothing wrong with plans. Backlogs are wonderful. And when we have emergent behavior, we have to respond to the facts on the ground. And it's not a threat, it's a promise. It's a promise. Andy, I promise. Here's what we set out to do, and I promise, if it doesn't look like this is working, we're going to make adjustments, and I'll involve you in any of them that are significant. That's something a sponsor needs to hear. Now, I want to talk a little bit about planning. We're going to do the Reader's Digest version. If we encounter something that's a surprise, what happens? We're going to back up and try to figure out, can we re-optimize? What can we shuffle around? Can I solve this within the boundaries of the original problem? If my plans are not credible, I have to back up and modify the plans. If I can spin till they're credible, yay! If I can't spin, then we have to go back and look at the definition. Which puts me back to planning, which puts me back to, are my plans credible? If they are, yay, we get into this plan, do, check, act loop that you've all seen in your quality homework. And as long as things are going more or less according to plan, we don't have to involve anybody. That's what an agile sprint is. Hey, things are going more or less according to plan. Life is good. And if the terrain and our map don't agree, we have to back up to planning. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about some of the optimization things that can go on in that plan. Kathy and I were talking during the break. People have discovered risk management, calling it pre-mortems. They've discovered risk management, something we've been doing in project management for 30 years. I want to talk a little bit about planning. Here's some ideas about negotiating scope. These are gross oversimplifications. Your team's going to have better ideas than I do. First, is there a particular requirement that's breaking your back, that's taking more resource or adding more risk to the project? Never tell them no. Suggest deferring it to a subsequent release. Sometimes that's something we can handle at a tactical level in the Scrum. Sometimes it's a high desire thing and we need to go ask Mom. Ask your team, how might we reduce scope? What functionalities what functionality might we defer that doesn't fundamentally undermine our goals? Are we building something we could buy? Most of you engineers, you know how that works. Yeah, I could get something off the shelf, but if I built it myself over 6 months in Excel, I could get something that was 4% more efficient, right? Look for big round numbers in a specification. Whenever you see a big round number in a specification, someone pulled it out of their shorts, and it's probably negotiable. This gets back to your architecture talk, Brian, right? We need to be able to handle 100,000 hits a minute. Really? Do you have any credible data that says you need 100,000? Because my testing says at 90,000 I'm golden, at 95 I get a little raggedy. What are we running right now? 30. Okay, you know what? Why don't we go live with 95 and we'll work on this, but that arbitrary line that you drew might be negotiable. Alternative approaches to the problem. Negotiate changes to rules or constraints. The first half of my career was built on the battle cry, it is easier to get forgiveness than permission. The second half of my career, which has been much more lucrative, is knowing when to ask permission. Okay? If I tell Sue, I got the job done. I had to kill 4 people and commit 4 felonies, you might not be as happy as if I came to you and said, Sue, I know how to do this, but it involves killing 4 people and committing felonies, in which case you might say, no, let's not do it that way. Okay? Now, the last piece I wanted to share with you, is 3 tips and an extra. Sometimes you just can't find a way to get the job done. You can't get there from here. What do you want to do? I want to run, not walk. If I can't build a credible plan that says this is going to happen, I don't want to cross my fingers and hope things get better. By the way, one of the things I do for a living is autopsies of large projects, and more than half of them, that's what happens. Well, we couldn't, don't ever say this in my presence. We couldn't prove it wasn't possible, so we just hope for the best. No, if you can't prove it's possible, it gets back to that null hypothesis thing. If you can't show me a credible plan that says it's doable, just assume it's not, okay? So I want to meet with the sponsor and discuss the impasse. I'll bring whatever artifacts I have for you guys, story points, features, sorted feature lists, history, what's our burn rate, what's been our velocity in the past. If our previous flight, we're consistently delivering X story points, and that is not going to get us where we want to go, rather than pretending, as someone did on a $500 million project to help euthanize about 18 months ago, that we're going to double our velocity next month and we're going to double it again the following month, you might want to have a conversation about, this dog won't hunt, right? If you have suggestions, show up with them. Worst management advice in the world is don't come to me with a problem unless you have a solution. Because, let me translate that for you. If you're really confused, I don't want to know. That's bad management advice. Best management advice I ever heard was don't come to me with a problem until you've thought about it. That's a reasonable expectation for an executive if you come to me with a problem. Here's what we thought of so far, and we're stuck. And here is a piece of project management judo that I learned about 15 years ago that serves me. And this gets to your talk, Berglund, about imposter. When you think you're an imposter, you hate showing any weakness. It turns out, if you come to a sponsor and you say, wait a minute, your sweater's covering it, Pamela, we're stuck. This piece right here has a stymie. Is there someone you love and trust, has expertise in this area that you want to get a second opinion? Because we're stuck. That is one of the strongest things you can do. I want you to imagine where Pamela's at. We're down here. She fought to get this project through the funnel. Every time she told the story, it got better. Not because she's an evil person, but because she's human. So she talked about the ROI and the risk, and every time she told the story, it was a little more valuable, a little less risky. And we're partway through this, and she has set expectations across the organization. When I come to her and break her heart and say, I understand what you want, but we're stuck and don't see how to do it, she is going to be grumpy. She's going to have a bunch of energy, and it's not happy energy. And if you say, is there someone you love and trust, we could get to look at this, we're giving her a constructive use for that energy. This is a constructive step you can take right here. Okay, here's the secret. It's a no-lose conversation. Because let's imagine she says, well, I'd like Sue to take a look at that. Okay. What might happen? Sue might look, what could she say? I don't see how to do this. We bring Sue in, we get a second opinion. What might she say?
Yeah, you're stuck.
Yeah, you're stuck. She's had a chance to cool off. She got a chance to exhibit her executive potential. She got a second opinion, agrees with mine. I win. What else might she say? Oh, you missed this. I win. I asked for help when I needed it. You found someone who could help me. We're golden. And tonight, you're going to worry about a third alternative. What if Sue is a mouth-breathing, knuckle-dragging moron? And I'm stuck. Pamela, I'm stuck. It takes a woman 9 months to have a baby, and we've only got 6 months. I'm stuck. And we bring Sue in, and Sue says, well, no problem. You just put 1.5 women on the task, and you get a baby in 6 months. And that's where you turn to the sponsor and say, Pamela, can I get Sue to work on this part of the project? Because she's got some mojo that I don't understand. I'm not going to call that a win. I'm going to call it a draw. So here's your bonus tip. I will never tell somebody that something can't be done. That invites an argument. Argue with me, Joseph. I don't want to have a conversation. I want to have an argument. This can't be done.
Yes, you can.
No, it can't.
Yes, you can.
No, it can't.
Do it.
Yeah, see? Outstanding role play there, Joseph. You know what's much harder to argue with? Hey, based on our current understanding of this and our current assumptions, we don't see how to do this. What can he say? Yes, you do? No, we don't. And that's the conversation. These are hard conversations, and if we can get a lead up, and have these quality conversations, not at the end when it's fourth down long yardage, not when we are moments away from when we're supposed to deliver, not when we're getting the 11th in a series of hideous quality reports. If we can have these conversations, do this expectation setting early with the executives that matter, they're still hard conversations, but they're not as hard, and they're much more constructive. And that was the message that I wanted to bring with you today. I'm happy to send you a copy of the slides. I see you guys frantically doing this. Questions? We've still got 12 seconds. Questions? I want to thank you very much for coming. I am here because I am whoring my project sponsorship book. You don't care. You might want to buy a copy for your boss. I got a couple up here you can look at. Thank you very much for coming and tolerating the technical glitch. It's been my pleasure. Happy to answer questions after. Really back. If you want a summary of everything, you can take a picture of that slide. It's how to implement an executive sponsorship program, improve the game of your sponsors. Because if they don't know what they're trying to do, they can't help you very well.
So we can influence them?
To an extent, if you're a project manager, you can influence a little bit. If you're in the project office, you can influence a little bit. Some of the tactics we talked about here are helpful for helping sponsors understand their role. That's been the big challenge over the last 10 years. We've realized sponsors have a role, and we're being slow to tell them, hey, there's obligations that come with this responsibility, and there's skills and stuff that you need to learn. This is really about how do you educate sponsors.